It was a significant legislative setback for President Trump and his administration yesterday as the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell acknowledged that he just doesn't have the votes needed to pass the Senate's Obamacare repeal and replace measure. The senator had hoped to get this all done by the end of this week. That was always an ambitious timetable, and they're not going to be able to do it. He announced that they'll have to punt on it until after the 4th of July recess. At the end of the day yesterday, after that had happened, President Trump invited all Republican senators over to the White House to discuss ways forward and where to go next. At that meeting, the president struck a downbeat tone. Here's what he said.
We have to have health care, and it can't be Obamacare, which is melting down. The other side is saying all sorts of things before they even knew what the bill was. This will be great if we get it done, and if we don't get it done, it's just going to be something that we're not going to like, and that's okay, and I understand that very well. But I think we have a chance to do something very, very important for the public.
The president there saying, if we get this bill done, that seems to be a concession to the idea that it's possible that this Obamacare repeal and replace effort won't succeed at all in the Senate. There are some Republican senators who are simply intransigent on all this. On the other hand, the White House looked at the House effort in which the House had to pull the bill, and ultimately Paul Ryan was able to get it passed through that chamber 6 weeks later. They see that as a model for what might happen here in the Senate. Mitch McConnell, for his part, came out to the White House driveway to talk to reporters after the meeting yesterday, and he said that if this doesn't work, if Republicans can't get their act together, they may have to negotiate with Democrats. Here's what he said.
As I've said, the status quo is simply unsustainable. It'll be dealt with in one of two ways. Either Republicans will agree and change the status quo, or the markets will continue to collapse, and we'll have to sit down with Senator Schumer. And my suspicion is that any negotiation with the Democrats would include none of the reforms that we would like to make.
Now, some of the objections here were in terms of the actual material in the bill, but some of the objections from the Republican senators had to do with the politics and the political hand that the White House was playing, including an America First super PAC that's linked with the Trump administration that was running ads against Senator Dean Heller, a Republican of Nevada. A lot of Republicans didn't like the idea of Republicans taking on their fellow Republicans here, particularly one who's in a vulnerable race for re-election. They didn't like the politics of that, and they didn't like the legislation that they were dealing with. So now the administration and Senator McConnell are going to regroup and see what they can do after that 4th of July recess, guys.
Hey, Eamon, can you just walk us through the calendar, though? So post July 4th, what could or could not happen, and then relate it back to all of the other legislative efforts, whether it's taxes or everything else that's going to have to happen or not happen this fall?
Yeah, look, I mean, this is an administration that said that it would have health care reform and tax reform finished by the August recess. It looks like they certainly won't have tax reform done by then, and they might not have the Obamacare repeal and replace effort done by then. But the calendar, Andrew, is really subject to the votes, right? When you have the votes, you call the vote, as they say in Washington, and that can be done more or less at any time with several days' notice. But the question is whether they can build a bill that brings in enough of the moderates without alienating as many of the conservatives. You know, you saw Club for Growth, the conservative organization, yesterday coming out against this bill, saying it didn't go far enough in terms of repealing Obamacare. It was sort of tinkering around the edges. That wasn't good enough for them. So I don't know how you bridge those. That's going to be the challenge. Yeah, Michelle.
There was talk that Mitch McConnell was just going to try to get a vote either way, just do it. And if the thing dies, okay. And then that way they can move on to getting the budget done, so that way they can also do tax reform. That every single day in delay of health care reform is a delay of tax reform, which is what the markets are very much more interested in. So what happened to that thought that they were going to do a vote, you know, live or die?
I think McConnell blinked. I mean, ultimately, you know, the idea here is the sort of the worst case scenario for the markets, which are focused on tax reform, because this implies that we're going to have a several-week delay here that's going to push back tax reform at some point later in the fall. The Senate wants to get onto that. The markets want the Senate to get onto tax reform, but McConnell seems to have decided ultimately that he's not willing to let this thing go down in flames. Either he sees a legislative strategy, he sees a path here that is not evident to the rest of us, or he just is simply unable to abandon this political promise that the Republicans have made to their base that they'll repeal and replace Obamacare. They've campaigned on it for 7 years. It's something the base believes in very strongly. They want the Republican majorities in the Senate and the House and the Republican president to deliver. So maybe he just decided he couldn't let this go just yet.
Hey there, thanks for checking out CNBC on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all of the day's biggest stories. You can also click on any of the videos around me to watch the latest from CNBC. Thanks for watching.